What up, what up, what up? Yo! Happy morning time to you and all of your family and friends. I hope I'm still in the frame. I think I am. I wanted to take a little bit of time today, and I don't know if this video might be a little bit shorter than the rest. Probably won't, because once I get going, I always think it's going to be shorter because I don't know exactly what I'm going to say, and then I start talking and I can't stop. Can't stop or won't stop. Anyway, today I wanted to talk just for a little bit before we move on in the story too much, because there's a lot. I mean, we're at the fall of 2005 at this point, right? We're barely to the point where I leave Infusionsoft for the first time. But I wanted to look back really and like just express as deeply as I can the appreciation that I have for number one, being given the opportunity to be involved back then. It really set my life on a path that I mean, obviously I never would have gotten into this at all if that hadn't been the case. But I think more specifically, I was given an opportunity to be involved in something, and I probably shouldn't have been. Wasn't really qualified for it. Plenty of people that would have been much more qualified to get in when I did and do what I was doing. But the opportunity that it gave me, and the opportunity that it gave me was amazing, and it's so deep and so important to me. I think it's important for me to express that. But I think it goes deeper than just, oh, it introduced me to some people and I made some friends and now I've built a career out of it. Because I've long said, I haven't really dug deep into this concept, but I've always said my first language in business was automation. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't dig into that a little bit more and help like you or myself even. Maybe this could just be, again, one of those therapeutic experiences, just to really dig into that idea and get a better idea of where I come from. Because the truth is, I've spent a lot of time, some foreshadowing here. When we start talking about when I left the first time, I'm gonna go a little bit into the story of why I left and where I went and why I was in Ukraine for 2 years. I'm not gonna go into it too deeply, but there's some interesting things there. But one of the things that I learned in that experience, which I'll get into more later, is I'm really good with languages. And that becomes, when I say foreshadowing, that becomes a very big part of everything that I've done since then. But I didn't actually know that at the time because I've never tried to learn another language. But I'm pretty good at it. And the thing that I'm good at specifically is understanding the difference between the words that I'm saying and the way that the person is understanding the words that I'm saying and the way that they would say it. And follow me here for a second because I gotta set this up, but it will make sense. See, we all have a native language, and no matter how much you try and train yourself, no matter how immersed you are in a different culture and a different language, your brain is hardwired to think in that language. Okay, and I think there are some exceptions, and I would imagine that if you grew up until you were 10 in a certain place and then you moved, like some of that stuff might shift. But the way that you think, in my experience, the way that you think is very, very closely associated with your native language, okay? Now, I think that has further application than just the words that we speak. Because it's not just English, not just do you speak English, it's where are you from? So I am from Arizona, and Arizona is a fairly, I'm gonna say this, it's gonna sound bad, but it's actually, I'm proud of it. Arizona is a fairly bland dialect. Meaning, we have a few things that we do that's fairly unique to us. It's been like the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico to a certain extent, some of Southern California, but it's more the east part of Southern California and Nevada, some of those places. We have a very sort of non-specific, a very generic accent, very generic colloquialism, very generic dialect. We just sort of speak natural American English, and we don't get, like most other places in the country and most other places that speak English have accents that you do. You don't do an accent from somebody from Arizona because it's blah. There's not really much to it. So anyway, the point there is, when you understand somebody's where they come from and the context of the language that they speak, you can make connections that they will understand better than maybe somebody else would using the same words. And I think that what's more important than the fact you can communicate to them in the language that they understand is that you don't miscommunicate with them when you understand their native language. So if I was just to speak using the colloquialisms of my family, for example, 65% of the words that I say would be movie quotes. And if I'm talking to my family, most of them would understand exactly what I'm saying. And it would be we have this movie quoting thing in our family. But get outside my family. In fact, this happens all the time with Sue. The Great Race and The Princess Bride are they're like the bedrock of my family's communication. It's actually kind of funny. But Sue has seen both of those movies, but doesn't understand them nearly as much as, couldn't quote them like I can. And there are so many instances when she'll say things and my mind wants to go to quote the movie because it's funny, but she won't get it. So I'm always like, you won't get the joke. But with my sister, we can have a whole dialogue that's just movie quotes back and forth, and it's a real conversation. So the point there is, if you understand somebody's where they come from, and you take into account the context of their native language, not only can you speak in their native language and they can understand you, but you can avoid misunderstanding. And I think that more important than achieving understanding is avoiding misunderstanding, because it's not hard. There's stories told all the time about in Chinese, they have different tones in the way they speak, and the same consonants, the same vowels, the same everything except for a different tone can mean something drastically different, right? And same thing in Russian, right? So there's a word muka and there's a word muka. And one of them means flower, and one of them means suffering or fly. I forget. The point is, they're different words. Muka and muka. There's a different accent. There's a different stress. It's a different word. It means something else. And this is another thing too that I think we all know intrinsically, but I don't think we think about how it affects the way we speak in other languages. The inflection of English doesn't work in Russian. So I would say something like, do you want to go, I should have thought of these before I came. Do you want to go to the movies? Right? Do you want to go to the movies? That's the way that we would say it here. But if I was to say that in Russian, but I would say it with the same inflection, it would sound funny, right? Ты хочешь идти в кино? Right? Ты хочешь идти в кино? I guess that one doesn't sound that weird, but sometimes that inflection doesn't really work the same way. There's an example. Well, actually, that one does work, and I apologize that I'm stumbling over this. I didn't think I was going to do this. But you could say "Ты хочешь идти в кино?" "Ты хочешь идти в кино?" Actually, right there, did you hear the difference between the two ways that I said it? "Ты хочешь идти в кино?" That's the way that an American would say it. And then a Russian might say, "Ты хочешь идти в кино?" Or they might say, what they're going to say is, "В кино хочешь?" "В кино хочешь?" "В кино хочешь?" You hear the difference? Like if I was to say that with that inflection in English, it'd be like, "Do you want to go to the movies?" Right? But now it has a totally different inflection, because if you say it that way, "Do you want to go to the movies?" What that means is, do you really want to go, or do you want to do something else? Like, are we serious here? So the point there is that there's a lot of nuance just to spoken communication, to the words that we use, and understanding somebody's native language makes a big difference in the communication that you can make with them. And I think the biggest point that I'm trying to make here is that if you speak somebody's native language, you don't have to explain. Like what I said at the beginning, my sister and I can speak using movie quotes. We don't need to explain what we mean. We're not saying the words that we mean. We're saying the quote from the movie, but we understand what's happening. And the same thing is true for me. I think one of the things that that tells me All right, we're back. I'm not sure exactly how much of that was cut off, but one of the things, really the thing that I'm the most grateful for, and the reason why I say automation is my first language, is because the opportunity that was given to me to be involved in the early days of a technology that was brand new at the time, and that and brand new in that particular application, and not having been brought up in a world without it, it has given me the ability to speak automation natively ever since then. And so with business owners that maybe were brought up in an older environment, or even business owners that are coming up now, being able to converse natively in that language and understand the principles of the way that automation actually works has been nothing but a blessing and an asset to me. And so again, more so than, like I said, the relationships are priceless. I wouldn't trade the relationships and the friendships and the people that I've met and the things that have happened for the world. But I think the core thing, the core undercurrent, the thing that holds all of that up, is the fact that my introduction to business, my introduction to marketing and sales and business was Infusionsoft. It was marketing. And so I'm not a marketer per se. I'm not a salesperson per se. I'm not a technologist per se. I'm an automator. I just made that up. I don't know. That's where I come from. I come from Infusionsoft with nothing beforehand, right? And so the context of everything that I do is based in how can we make automation do more for us, and go forward that way. It's literally the difference between speaking to somebody who has lived. There is a difference between speaking to somebody who has lived and worked in Russia for 20 years and understands the nuances of the language from an academic standpoint, and someone who was born and raised in Moscow. That's the difference. Now, I'm not saying one is necessarily better than the other, but there is a difference between the two. And there's something that you can't really explain about being a native of the language that you're speaking, because those things aren't important. The why and all the structure of the language isn't important because you know it. You know it intrinsically. It's second nature to you. And that's the case with me. So I am grateful to Clayt and Eric and Scott and Brad and all of them that put up with me in my derpiness of being a teenager, and then brought me back again later, which we'll get into later, and then brought me back again for a third time. And then Brad, who brought me back in again for a fourth time. It's been, I couldn't repay that for the world. So this is like it's kind of a thank you, hidden in a lesson about language, but that's also just hidden in a thank you. So I'm grateful for the opportunity, grateful for everything that I was able to get from that. And I hope that I'm doing enough in the space to support what's happening to deserve the head start that I got. So anyway, that's all that I have for today. We'll see you next week.